Welcome, dear students. In the current session, I would talk about permanent additions and adaptations in English language that took place. The objective of the session is that by the end of this session, you would be able to critically evaluate the need for permanent additions and adaptations. Well, my dear students, if we consider the exaggeration of a critic like Wilson, the idea that comes to mind is that maybe much of the effort that was put into introduction of new words into English language was all pedantic and ill-advised. And one thinks that it was all going wrong with the language. Some of the words that Wilson has ridiculed, they of course can be ridiculed because they are again incoherent terms that are just superficially added into the language. Just it seems as if they are forced to be added. However, on the basis of those few words, we cannot say so. We should not make the mistake of thinking so that all the borrowings that were done, all the additions that were made, all the adaptations that took place, they were useless or they were harmful. In fact, many of them are in such common use today that sometimes it really becomes hard for us to think of why did Elizabethan people find them difficult, why they found them strange. I would give you an example. For instance, Eliot needed a single word for what he says, all manner of learning, all type of learning. And you know what happened? The options that he had were world of science, the circle of doctrine, But, finally, he got this word from Greek language, one word, and this was the outcome, encyclopedia. So, the word comes from Greek language. So, this is how, sometimes permanent additions are needed. Words are really, genuinely, they are required. The words that were introduced at this time were often basic words. They were either nouns or adjectives or verbs. And by the way, that is why they have retained their status through times. So I'm going to give you some examples. First of all, I'd give you examples of nouns. Look at all these words. These are all borrowings. Allurement, illusion, anachronism, atmosphere, autograph, capsule, denunciation, and so on and so forth. You can see all these words that are shown here on the slide are borrowings, and we are so used to them that we think they are a part of English language originally. When it comes to adjectives, among adjectives we again have many. So, for example, agile, appropriate, conspicuous, dexterous, expensive, external, habitual, hereditary, impersonal, insane, and so on and so forth. There is also a big range of words, the verbs that were brought from other languages, French, Latin, and Greek into English language. And here we have a long list of those. I would just point out a few: adapt, alienate, assassinate, benefit, consolidate, and disregard, that was introduced by Milton. In the same way, here we have many other words on the list. Well, my dear students, most of the words, that came into English language during this time, they were from Latin language. Some words that came from Latin language originally belonged to Greek language. They were a part of the Greek language, and then they moved from one language to the other, and then from the other to yet another, and this is how they reached English language. Here I have given some examples. I would just read out the last few: chaos, chronology, climax, crisis, and critic. So, all these words even a list of words that is given here, like system, scheme, skeleton, tactics. These are all the words that entered into English language via, Latin language. So, basically, what was the route of entry into English language? Greek words in English, they entered through either Latin language, as I have already given examples, or through French language. However, because there was a revival of interest in the learning of, the classics during the Renaissance period, so, the renewed learning of Greek led towards some direct borrowings as well. So, what I'm pointing out is that there were indirect borrowings and there were direct borrowings. The indirect borrowings were the borrowings, that came from Greek language via, through the channel of either Latin or French. And then there were borrowings that were direct from Greek language in this period of Renaissance. Here are some of the examples: anonymous, criterion, idiosyncrasy, lexicon, tantalize, thermometer, and tonic. We most of the times take these words as if they originally belong to English. The reason is, of course, we get so much used to them, we find them so very familiar that they do not sound strange. When it comes to adaptations, my dear students, some words entering in the language retained their original form, some changed. Some, I would give you an example of, for example, the word cup in English. When it, came to English, it has the Arabic origin, koob. From koob, it comes as cup. That was just a by the way example. I move forward. We have again a list of words like climax, appendix, and epitome, etc. That still have their Latin forms available. Adaptation through cutting off the Latin ending was another way of adapting. So, conjectural, this end, is, this, in the words exclusion, for example, in, Latin language, it was exclusionum. From here, this em is removed. So, this is how, conjectural is removed. In Latin language, it is conjecturalis. All right. So, the last endings, they would be kind of cut off. Sometimes it is necessary to, give a shape and form to a word so that it comes, in harmony with the usual English forms. So, a lot of English forms, as I have said earlier, and here we have examples as well, by cutting them off or by modifying them, they were used. Latin noun endings, again, were changed. Also, these endings, antia, entia, nc, ans, we find these words from, for example, I would give the example of the word appear, appearance. By adding these, new words were made. Adjective endings were also, modified, and here are some examples. For example, constancy, frequency, these are all considerable. These are all the examples of adjectives. Overall, I would say that additions in English language took place on a permanent basis, either by directly borrowing the words or by indirectly borrowing them through the route of other languages.